Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today and welcome to BuzzBack's latest webinar, A Fresh Take on Package Development. During the presentation, all participants will be in a listen-only mode. However, you may submit questions at any time today by typing them through the chat feature located to the left of your screen. Or if you're in full screen mode, look for it at the top of your screen. We'll be fielding questions at the end of the presentation, and as a reminder, today's call is being recorded and will be offered at the conclusion of today's event. I would like to take this time to introduce you to Carol Fitzgerald, President and CEO of BuzzBack. As the founder and owner of BuzzBack, Carol started BuzzBack with a vision of changing how consumers interact with marketers online, focusing on making the experience engaging and fun. This year, she received an Enterprising Woman of the Year award, recognizing fast-growth businesses, women who mentor or actively support other women. Carol is a cum laude graduate of Dartmouth College, and her honors thesis on T.S. Eliot continues to be cited in academic works on the author. Carol, please go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today. Thanks, Melanie. We are going to talk a little bit about packaging and packaging development. Specifically, in terms of what we cover, just a little bit of background about the problem and some of what we hear from clients. Secondly, we'll go through an actual case study that has two parts. And third, we'll summarize and figure out what insights we took away and how you can potentially move forward. So for those of you who are not that familiar with BuzzBack, we work with about half of the top 50 global consumer product companies and also with about 10 of the top 20 global pharmaceutical companies. And a good chunk of what we do is focused on packaging. Packaging is definitely a problem for a lot of you out there, especially those of you who I recognize who signed up for this webinar. What makes us different is that we have a portfolio of online projective techniques which are very visually focused, and therefore our reporting is also very visually focused. But we design these techniques to get beneath the surface, and today we're going to introduce a new one called Configurator, and we'll talk specifically about how we use that in packaging as well as some other applications that you might consider going forward. So I spend about 2-3 days in the field speaking with clients and meeting with many of you. And last year my fun fact was I visited 105 companies, not just individual clients. And the problems are very similar across the board, especially for those of you that have consumer packages. I'm sure you've heard of the moments of truth, and some research has shown that shoppers already know what they want before they get into the store. Additionally, in a McKinsey newsletter I read last week, they talked about us being at a crisis of attention that's driven not just by technology, but by media and an overabundance of information. Additionally, when it comes to packaging, Design Week actually this month still October, this month focused on brand mnemonics. And what they mean by that is what are those iconic elements of your pack or of your product that communicate what your product positioning is and what your brand is, and specifically how you want to convey your product benefits. One of the best examples of that is the Coke bottle, which has a very recognizable form. Even without the logo, you know what it is. So among those of you that I talk to, when we come to package design and package development, there's sort of generally two approaches that I see clients using to evolve their pack design. One is focus groups and more qualitative techniques where they get feedback, they iterate, they enhance the design. And secondly is more quantitative testing, oftentimes eye tracking with central location testing. And there you're looking to have benchmarks and norms and figure out how to evolve the pack design beyond that. At BuzzBack, we find that clients come to us and say that they want to do a packaging study. And realistically, their questions may range across some of the ones that you see focused on screen. So the actual methodology of the study may vary based on what the questions are and what the objectives are. And these are some of the things that you're talking about when you say I have a packaging study. So let's focus on a couple just to give you some examples. So first, is it findable on shelf and does it motivate purchase? The two photos that you see in the background are from the local Duane Reade here in New York and also Boots in the UK. And as you can see, the store brands get really good at looking like the main consumer brands. In fact, it becomes increasingly difficult for the consumer to tell the difference. And in fact, there's lots of what we call copycat brands out there. So how do you differentiate and how do you create value for what your brand is? A second packaging problem that's really different may relate to the form. So this is one of my classic examples. I'm a heavy gum chewer, and we actually worked on this pack a few years ago, where they were really trying to increase consumption by having a different kind of packaging for Trident Blue. The photo on the right is the actual pack on my desk, and in fact, people come into my office and grab a piece of gum at any point in time. So it does actually increase consumption overall versus me just buying individual packs. So those are just a couple of examples of how your pack needs could actually vary. At BuzzBack, we generally are focusing on sort of 3 areas of packaging development, which you see reflected on screen. And some of the questions that get asked along with these different phases of development are also shown here. Today, in our case study, we're going to focus on the first 2. So let's dive in and cover that right now. And I do encourage you to ask questions along the way. We will field them at the end, but you can type and chat at any time. So this is a case study where we actually fielded a made-up product, and it's based on a lot of the pack work we do. It's just, as you know, it's difficult for us to show client work specifically, but essentially there were 2 phases. And the first phase was very much exploratory in understanding what the role of the elements of the pack are. And the second phase was a little bit more evaluative, but still with a focus on optimizing and refining the pack going forward. And in most of our work, we include our techniques. Some of them are shown on the bottom half of the screen, but we'll talk specifically about what those are and how we use them in each of the different phases, and also how it relates to some of the common problems out there. So in the first phase, we really were looking to understand what the specific elements of the pack were communicating. In this case, we had consumers view a brief product description, and then we had them actually build out the pack that they thought represented what that product conveyed. So what you see here is a demo of our new configurator tool. This tool is very flexible and customizable. We start with your assets, and it's a made-up example, as I commented. So what we had was the actual form of the shampoo bottle. It was a shampoo product. And then we allowed consumers to go in and essentially build the pack. So they could create this wallpaper background that you see now. They could go in and talk about the benefits of the product. They could select the best name, and then they could even select some of the visuals that go with that. We would start with whatever your assets are and populate the libraries accordingly. There's a lot of flexibility in terms of how we design the tool. And at the end of this discussion, we will come back to some other ways that we can use Configurator in your quote development process. But as you can see here, the consumers were building the pack essentially. Now, the purpose of this exercise is not necessarily to be a choice exercise, but really to engage with the consumer, which is what all of our techniques do at BuzzBack, to help them articulate, what they perceive the benefits are. So when they're done, they actually talk about it, and we're going to go through some of that learning and see what they said in this first phase. So first, in case you're curious, these are the actual assets that populated the library, so you could see the different choices that they could select from. And we can look at the individual elements, and we can look at them quantitatively if we want to do that, but we're really focused on why consumers are picking the specific elements. So just to highlight a few of the things that you see here, definitely the form was a standout feature, and we'll see that coming back in the second phase of the research. And in particular, the cap communicated easy dispensing, right? And the color blue was somewhat appealing, but it needed to work together with the rest of the pack. You can also see the theme of tropical and botanical coming through, and that's mentioned in the actual descriptors, and the visuals of the graphics, as you see reflected here, reinforce that. So we really wanted to understand how consumers were engaging with those elements and how those elements related back to the product description and what they conveyed. In case you're curious, we can actually look at how the individual elements did, and that's just more for your understanding, potentially from a directional standpoint more than anything else.